What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and in continuing my series of Disney movie reviews, I'm here to let you know that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is no perfect movie. And in it, as very few of you probably don't already know, but I'll say it anyways, Snow White is a very perfect princess who is on the run from her evil stepmother, a queen who is extremely jealous of her beautiful looks. So she comes across a cottage where seven dwarves live: Duck, Happy, Bashful, Sleepy, Sneezy, Dopey, and best of all, Grumpy. And when she offers to housekeep for them, they take her in, they form a strange but somewhat natural bond with her, all the while the queen is coming up with various different ways to try and kill Snow White. And at this point in time, animation really served as just 6 to 10 minute shorts that studios would put out before their movies, basically as a warm up. Disney had Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphony shorts. Warner Brothers had Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, which is really just the same thing as Looney Tunes, but whatever. And in the 40s, MGM would have Tom and Jerry. So Snow White was a game changer being a feature-length movie. It was the first animated feature-length film. It was Disney's first animated feature. And when you look at how many times it's been re-released over the course of several decades, it's made over $400 million. Inflation-wise, it's the most successful animated movie of all time. Is it a masterpiece? No, there are a lot of things that are outdated about it, but as is, it's very clear that this was the stepping stone for what would become the quintessential Disney formula. So let's start off with the animation, because there are a couple things about it that really stand out, and some things that are a little conflicting. Like the backgrounds and the locations, they're all beautifully drawn with this watercolor style that makes you feel like you're looking at a storybook come to life. It's a feature that makes a lot of Ghibli films look really good as is. But it's also a technique that they don't use Disney-wise that often because it's apparently a little trickier to do. And you could tell that they drew the human and the animal characters so much more differently to have this realistic look to it. The animals have more exaggerated features like eyes and smiles to portray a lot of expressions without dialogue, and those really go to show. The dwarves all have very nice designs that complement their personalities. The thing that really stuck out about the humans was sometimes they're drawn with white outlines as opposed to black outlines. For example, Snow White's hair is outlined white. The evil queen, when she takes on her disguise, her robe is covered with white lines that I think was supposed to make her look a little ominous, but those white lines, when the characters are moving around, actually makes them look kind of blurry and kind of like they're morphing. It has that rotoscope-ish feel, kind of like a Scanner Darkly where things are constantly changing, but with Scanner Darkly, that was the point. It was supposed to look surreal and strange. But with this movie, it was the first animated feature, and they were just discovering what works and what didn't. So it was clear as day that was a feature that didn't work, and they learned from that, because having already seen Pinocchio, they definitely cleaned that aspect of it up. But for a while, and this is just like for the first half hour or so, because after a while you just get used to it, but for the first little bit you really can't understand why it looks like their hair is morphing all the time. But nevertheless, the animation itself is still really good. It still has a lot of bright and vibrant colors to it. Not so much dark and muted because there aren't that many dark moments, but there really honestly didn't need to be for this movie. The characters still move at a very fast and fluid pace that feels very realistic. The designs of the humans were meant to look a lot more realistic, and I think it was such a time-consuming process that it's the reason you don't really see that in later Disney animated features, but for first try, it was still really good. And the music, I actually found this out. This is the first movie soundtrack that ever existed, and it was for Snow White, because in 1937, nobody thought anyone would buy a record of a movie soundtrack, which is weird, but the fact that this was the first one, it's a pretty good one to have. The music is not the strongest lyric-wise, but like most Disney songs, it's the composition of the songs and the people singing that really makes you latch onto them. Everyone obviously knows Hi Ho because it's such a simple but very effective and catchy song to basically hum or whistle to. Someday My Prince Will Come has this sense of hope and romance that the characters pine for, and the woman who sings Snow White did a really good job. That was her best singing in the entire movie for sure. The yodeling sequence when Snow White first has dinner with the dwarves for the first time, that was probably my favorite sequence in the movie. The slapstick was very well timed between the dwarves. The music sounded really good. It's really hard to make you latch onto yodeling, but they found a way to make it work. And based on the bond between her and the dwarves, and we'll talk more about that later, it was just great seeing these characters just sit back, relax, and have fun. And that is exactly what you want from a Disney movie. It doesn't always have to make sense. The story doesn't always have to be that clear or that focused. You just need to have fun. And there are so many moments in this movie where you just can't help but smile and laugh at even the dumbest things. I will say this though, if this is a movie that you go into expecting substance or character depth, you are not going to get that in this movie, because if the movie solely focused on Snow White as a character, this movie would just be known for being the first animated feature, and that's it, because she's one of the least interesting Disney princesses. She's not the worst. I'd give that to the Black Cauldron Princess, but apparently she doesn't count. But in all seriousness, Snow White herself is a really boring main character, which, if she was the main character of this movie, because she technically isn't, she's the title character, it would have really sunk it. Because she doesn't have an arc, she doesn't really learn anything from the very few mistakes that she makes, because she still comes across as being so flawless, and that's kind of the thing about her. She doesn't really, whenever she reacts to something and then understands what's going on, she just goes back to being so jolly and cheerful. And there are some moments where it works, but there are a lot of moments, especially during the first 20 minutes, where it really is all about her, that I just sat back and I'm like, why should I care about you? You seem like you've got everything already figured out. And weirdly enough, I thought the Queen was even more boring. Her motivation made absolutely zero sense. You are the queen of this kingdom. Everyone obeys you completely out of fear. That's something that's established for the dwarves. And your knowledge of black magic and alchemy can make you do so many great things. Your dark magic could technically make you more beautiful than your stepdaughter. Who the hell cares if she's naturally more beautiful than you? In fact, you don't even feel the tension between the two of them, because they only have one scene together, and it's that big scene with the apple. And that scene with the apple actually made me think, why didn't you do this earlier? Hell, why that apple scene was basically the main thing that made me think you spent all this magic to try and kill her instead of making you look more beautiful so that she can sulk and weep about it? Really? I didn't even think the voice actress was all that threatening. I actually found her kind of flat. Now, despite how angry I might seem about the hero and the villain, what really does save this movie for sure is the interactions between Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They have believable chemistry together in a way that's gonna sound weird as I describe it, but once they take her in and she offers her services to them, they kind of built this very strange but still kind of natural motherly bond with Snow White, because you genuinely believe that she's offering to cook and clean for them out of gratitude for letting her stay with them. But at the same time, what was probably the only impressive thing about her is that she did have a stern attitude towards them if they misbehaved. If they showed up at the dinner table with their hands dirty, she would not serve them unless they cleaned up. And I gotta admit, I gotta admire her for having a little bit of guts during those moments. The dwarves have multiple personality traits. They're named after their main trait for the sake of comedy, but they still express a lot of different emotions, and it leads to a lot of really good slapstick between them, especially when they first find Snow White at their house and they think through various misunderstandings that she's something else. It leads to some good pratfalls, some good use of props and built-up suspense, and the dwarves themselves, even with only one personality trait, they were still really likable, and they had really good voice actors. And the things that they don't tell you about, like their past, makes you wonder, once they meet Snow White, if they ever really had a mother figure like her before. And you really come to believe that they legitimately believe the amount of hard work and effort that she's putting in for them. You genuinely believe that she loves them unconditionally, and you believe that it's affecting them greatly, especially with Grumpy. When she kisses him on the head for the first time, and he lights up like a Christmas tree, it's just like, Has no one ever treated you this well before? That is a damn shame, but it's a good thing you're getting that now. So, based on my ramblings, you can tell that Snow White doesn't have a lot going for it in the ways of substance and character depth, but at the same time, I'm not sure if it's really trying to. There are a lot of people who say that this movie plays based on having an emotional experience over than having a clear story or a clear message. And the scenes that really played your emotions, it left a big smile on my face. I was laughing, I was tapping my feet to the songs, I was whistling to the ones that I already knew. And overall, even though it had a rocky start with the first half hour of Snow White just being, oh, I'm so perfect and flawless and nothing really to fear for, regardless of that, I still had a pretty decent time. So I'm going to give Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs a 3.5 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Snow White, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Be sure to stay tuned for more Disney reviews because I'm getting into the bona fide classics at this point. And be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.